I don't want to record a whole video and realize I was like over here. Maybe it sounds like obvious, but like you'd better really like it because it is too much work. Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. But today I'm actually going to be telling you all the behind the scenes of how I tell you that stuff, because my channel just hit its 1-year anniversary, and this is part 2 of a 2-part series where I'm basically telling everything that you, if you are as nosy as I am, could possibly want to know about the behind the scenes of the first year of a YouTube channel. So if you missed it, I already did a part 1 where I went over all the numbers of the channel, including views, subscribers, and money for the first year. So if that is interesting to you, I hope you'll go check that one out after this one. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about more of the like how the sausage gets made. Everything I learned in my first year of having a channel, everything I've figured out, how to do things, how I set things up here to record. So this is one where if you have ever been thinking about starting your own channel or particularly your own knitting podcast, I hope this can be helpful to you. And if you haven't, I hope it's just interesting to see the other side of the camera. I'm going to show you what I'm looking at right now. So I'm going to go over the process of my videos from start to finish, as well as what equipment I use, and also some questions that I've been asked by viewers. So if you're curious about those things, I hope you'll stick around. But before we get into that, I am still drinking out of my Courtney Zimmerman ceramics mug with the cute rainbow handle, because it's the same day as I was recording part 1, but I am drinking a new tea because I've been sitting here forever and I needed to make another one. So I am now drinking a Bigelow Botanicals Raspberry Blackberry Hibiscus blend, which is real good. Okay, let's start by talking process. So I mentioned in part 1, just to give us a bit of a sense of scale here, that each video takes me roughly 10 hours to make, which I'm really curious if that is more or less time than you would have expected. So normally my videos run between like 35 to 55-ish minutes. There's 1 or 2 outliers on either end, but it's usually in that range. And to produce that video usually takes about 10 hours. And it breaks down into a few like main steps. So I'll give you like the brief rundown first. So the first one is filming, which usually takes me about 2 hours. I will usually be sitting here talking to myself, maybe an hour and a half if I'm speedy that week, but it's usually closer to 2. So in addition to my tea that I'm always showing you, I also always have a giant water because talking to yourself for 2 hours makes you dry. So meet my trusty Yeti, who you don't usually see on the channel. And fun fact, another thing that's less obvious in watching the channel is that this is my favorite color. It just happens that I don't like to wear it. I don't like how it looks on me, so I don't usually knit out of it, but I have a few different Yeti drinking vessels for various purposes, and they are all this color. So after filming, the next step, and by far the biggest step of the process, is the editing, and specifically just like doing the initial cut. So like going through those 2 hours of footage and cutting it down. Because when I'm filming, I don't know how these people do it who just like turn on the camera and record start to finish and have almost no cuts in their videos. That's not me. I am stopping and restarting sentences. I am saying the same thing 4 different times. It's a mess. It's a lot of editing. So doing that initial, just cutting the footage into what I want to actually include into the final cut, that usually takes me about 5 hours. And to give you a sense of how this happens time-wise throughout the week, because I post my videos every other Saturday morning. So usually I will film on a Saturday, like a week after my last video has gone up. So I give myself a full week off from YouTube. My video will go up one Saturday. I have a whole week where I don't worry about YouTube. And then the next Saturday is when I will usually record. And then I usually start doing that edit on a Sunday. I'll usually spend at least a couple hours on it, kind of see how far I get. Depending on the weekend, how much time I have, what I feel like doing, sometimes I'll finish the whole cut on a Sunday. But if not, I'll sort of poke at it throughout the weeknights and sort of the first half of the week. After I've done that main cut of the video, I have to pop in all the pictures and like text on the screen. And so depending on the video, like some have more of that than others, that usually takes me between half an hour to an hour. I also need to make a thumbnail for the video. Sometimes I make a couple and test them against each other. YouTube does let you do some A/B testing. I have never gotten a dramatic difference in the different thumbnails that I've tried. So sometimes I do it when I just can't decide which one I like and it sort of is the tiebreaker, but I have never had a dramatically different result. But I've also never tried like, I guess really dramatically different thumbnails, so maybe that would make more of a difference. But anyway, so that usually takes me between half an hour to an hour. And then I have to do the metadata, which is basically pulling everything together for the description box. So that's like all of the project links and pattern links. It's links to any books I've talked about, any other YouTube channels I've referenced, just finding everything in the video that I talked about and putting links for that in the description box. Also popping in anytime a link pops up during a video of like, if I mention my fall knitting plans and it's like, oh, here's a link to the fall knitting plans, I have to put all those in. I have to figure out where the ad breaks should be, like where are good kind of natural pauses for it to go, where it's still spread out in a relatively even way. I have to find all the timestamps where each different section of the video starts so that the video has those little sections you can jump between on the timeline. So all that stuff usually takes me about half an hour. And then the last step is reviewing the transcript, because YouTube will auto-generate a transcript for your video, but it is always like riddled with errors. Like, amazing errors sometimes. Like, did you know that it will never one single time spell mohair correctly, but it will spell it incorrectly like 17 different ways, none of which are actual words. So like, I have now devised, like, because it's often the same words that it's messing up because it's a lot of knitting vocabulary, I now have a list that I go through and like systematically do the find and replace before I even start like reading through to check the whole document manually, because I'm like, I just know that it's going to try to write hair, that it's going to spell mohair, M-O-H-A-R-E, that it's going to spell mohair. Like, it will spell everything except mohair. So reviewing the transcript entails watching the whole video start to finish while reading that document on my screen. And this usually takes me like maybe 25 to 50% more than the watch time of the video to do, because I'm having to pause it to fix things. So the transcript does take kind of a significant amount of time, but it's also something that's really important to me to do because it really matters, both for viewers who need the subtitles to be able to ingest the content, and I think deserve a version of that that's not full of errors. Like, when I'm reading these transcripts, I'm like, oh my lord, like, can I tell what it's trying to say? Yes, but it's also like not good. So people who need subtitles deserve better than that. And I also know that it's not only people who expressly need them who like using them as well. Like, it actually turns out from the stats that I can see on my channel that 22% of my viewers have the English language subtitles turned on while they're watching. Like, that's a huge chunk of people who either like or need to have the subtitles on. So like, if my channel were at a point where it was making enough money that I felt like it was worth paying someone to do that, that would be the first thing that I outsource, because it is the part that I find the most tedious, especially because by the time I'm doing that, like, I have seen this content so many times in editing. Like, I don't want to sit here and watch this video one more time. And I don't want to sit here and fix every time it's spelled mohair wrong. But currently that doesn't feel worth doing to me. It would eat way too much into my channel revenue. But like, in a world where I was like, okay, I'm ready to outsource. What can I outsource? That's number one, 100%. So all those things after the initial cut, the like popping in pictures all the way through the transcript, these are things I'm like picking away at through the week on weeknights, then have it all wrapped up at the very latest by Friday night. So the video is scheduled to go up 8:30 a.m. EST on Saturday. And so I'd like doing the schedule because it does give me that whole week off where I don't have to worry about YouTube. Like, I know that I have dedicated time where I can just be knitting, I can be doing my other stuff because I have other hobbies and friends and family I want to hang out with, and, you know, all these different obligations. And so I really like the every other week schedule, kind of giving me that time where I don't have to think about it. And it also gives me flexibility where, like, if things just don't work out based on other plans of me being able to record when I usually do, it gives me some buffer to be able to figure out, okay, well, how can I figure it out this week, you know? So that's kind of the overall process. And like I said, that usually takes me about 10 hours per video. So when I'm sitting down to record, I have kind of my whole little makeshift setup here, which I will show you footage of in a minute so you can kind of see like what I'm looking at. But so I have my phone set up as my camera on a little tripod. I have my laptop, which has my phone mirrored so I can see what the camera sees. So if I'm trying to see, is this in focus? Am I still in frame? All of that kind of stuff. And it also includes my notes. So before I sit down to record each episode, I make sure my notes are all organized. I have over time developed like a template that I use for this. It starts with a checklist of like, is your camera set to 4K? Is it recording at 24 frames per second? Turn down the brightness on your laptop so the screen doesn't reflect in your glasses. Turn on the light over here. Like, all of these things are in there so I don't forget. And then there's also blanks for like, what tea I'm drinking today, what mug I'm using, like all of the things that are part of the standard format of my videos, I have set up in this template that I can just fill out for each time. So I don't have to like try to reinvent the wheel every time and try to remember everything I'm supposed to cover. And then throughout the couple weeks from one filming to another, I will just kind of fill out that template as I go. Like, as I have a thought about a project that I want to remember, I will just go jot it down in my template. And then before I go record, I will just kind of like shuffle anything around that needs like reorganizing just to make sure it's all ready to go. All right, let's talk equipment. So I'm recording this on my iPhone, which now is an iPhone 16, the regular one, not the Pro. I was previously recording on an iPhone 11 Pro up until a few episodes ago. And at the time that I bought the 11 Pro, the Pro had a much better camera than the regular one. So I went for the Pro with that one. When I needed to get a new phone this time and I was looking at it, the camera differences were really not like relevant to me between the 16 and the 16 Pro. So I decided to just go with the regular. So I think that it is so possible to record good video on an iPhone. Like, you absolutely don't need a special camera to be able to get started having a YouTube channel that looks nice. I do think though that like the absolute key to that working well is good lighting. iPhones are amazing when you have good lighting, and it's kind of garbage when you don't. So like, I don't recommend trying to record on an iPhone in a dark room with low artificial light. That's not gonna look good. But if you have, like, I have a room with a really big window over here, so that brings in a ton of natural light, and that's all I was using for a long time in my videos. I do now have like a filming light here and just like a regular lamp here to help out a little bit, mostly just so I'm not so tethered to what times of day I can film at. But if you have a window that lets in good natural light in a place where you can sit and film there, that's really all you need to get started. I'm now using a tripod for my phone to get it to the height I want. I did not have that when I started. I was literally just piling books up to the height that I wanted and just kind of like leaning my phone against it and hoping for the best. This is why in early videos my camera angle does change slightly sometimes, because it would fall and I'd have to put it back and it wouldn't be exactly where it had been. So there is that, but just you can make it work without a tripod for sure. And I am still using a book under the tripod. We're still makeshifting it here. But this tripod is one that I've actually had forever. It's one of those GorillaPods from when those were really popular in like 2010. I didn't initially have a way to attach my phone to it. I had to buy a little like iPhone clamp adapter thing to screw into it. So I waited to do that until I kind of made a few videos and had sort of like proof of concept in a sense that I wanted to keep doing this. Like I said, I have my computer over here for my notes and for my monitoring. So this is a MacBook Pro. This is what I do all my editing on. Again, I have this for work. If I was not a graphic designer, I would not have this fancy computer. You can definitely edit on a less fancy computer. Now, one thing I figured out that I think might actually be useful to you if you're thinking of starting a channel or if you're kind of in the early stages of yours, I had to do a lot of experimenting to find a good way to be able to monitor my camera while I'm recording, because recording on my iPhone, unless you're using your selfie camera, which I don't recommend because it's the worst camera on the phone, I can't see on my phone what it's recording right now because that's facing a wall. But it's important that when I'm like holding up stuff to the camera and I want to know, like, is it in focus? Where is it? Is it out of frame, right? It's important to know these things. I don't want to record a whole video and realize I was like over here, right? So it's important to be able to see what you're doing. But I found it harder than expected to find a good way to do that. So between an iPhone and a MacBook, you can use AirPlay to like mirror your screen onto the computer. But I found that when I was doing that, I was getting quite a bit of lag. Like, not so bad that I couldn't like figure out the basic framing of my video, but enough that if I was trying to like in real time be like, is this in focus? Is it in frame? It was completely useless. So I was like, okay, that's not gonna work. And what I eventually found that feels kind of roundabout but works really well for me is that I use Zoom. I start a meeting that's just me and I screen share. And in the screen sharing options under advanced, there's an option to share screen from your phone using a cable. There's an option both with a cable and wirelessly, but I do with a wire just because, again, like I'm recording 4K video. That's a lot of data to be trying to transmit live wirelessly. And so that's where the lag comes in. So using the cable, screen sharing into Zoom, I get a much better real-time monitor of what the camera's picking up. Now it does help that, again, for my job, I have Zoom Pro, so it's not kicking me out every 45 minutes. But at the same time, like if you haven't found a better way to do it, having to reset it up every 45 minutes, maybe you have to set it up 2 or 3 times while you're recording, like I don't think that's the worst thing. It takes like 2 seconds. So that works for me, maybe it'll work for you.
Editing Allie here. You're gonna see me a few times throughout this video because as I'm editing this, I'm having quite a few thoughts that I want to add in, and because this is not a type of video that I do a lot on my channel, like often if I think of something, I'm like, oh, I'll just mention it in the next video, and that's not really, I don't make behind the scenes videos super often. So I just wanted to make sure to get these things in here while I'm doing this. So I just want to add in my best tip for making your videos look better is make sure that your camera's angled down toward you rather than up at you if you can. So this is where that's hard to accomplish without a tripod. So like honestly, I think that if you're thinking of spending any money on your channel, a tripod is probably the smartest one. Like I will pop in a side-by-side comparison of 2 of my early videos where I like figured this out, where I switched from having my phone like leaning back against a stack of books to being like up on a tripod pointing down a little. It just, the angle just feels much more like natural and comfortable, and it just, I think in a way that a lot of people can't quite put their finger on, it just makes it feel more professional.
I've also just in the last few weeks started using, like I said, the filming light that I now have here, and also a dedicated microphone. I now have the Rode Wireless Micro. So both of these were Christmas gifts. These were not investments that I like decided to make for the channel, but just really nice, thoughtful gifts. So having this light gives me more flexibility in when I can record, which is really nice, and just help to fill things out a little bit more, even when I am recording at times where there's nice natural light. So this is the Logitech Litra Beam. It's very adjustable. You can have it either like horizontal or vertical, and you can like angle it. It's just a really good like flexible option. And then the Rode Wireless Micro, I'm kind of using this like against how you're supposed to use it a lot of the time. So it's this little set that in the middle there would be the little transmitter that's currently plugged into my laptop where I'm recording this from. And then this is the second of the two mics. This is the one I'm not using. The other one is currently sitting in front of me. But so these are designed to be little lapel mics, and I use it that way when I'm like getting up to show knits like full body away from the camera. But when I'm sitting here, I just have it propped up on something close to my camera because I prefer not to have it on my knits when I'm trying to like show my knits. And I find that it still does like nicely help the quality of my audio, even this way, not using it the way it's like best used, because it's just, like, as a designer, like just as a very visually minded person, I don't like it when the visual gets worse to make the sound better. Particularly when, to me, like the intrusion of a mic makes the video look significantly worse. While I am not a very like attuned to sound details kind of person, so to me the sound is like maybe marginally better, but I probably wouldn't have even noticed if you hadn't pointed it out to me, versus like all I can see is this like giant boom mic sitting in front of you or whatever it is, you know. Like I know a lot of people really notice sound quality and they're very particular about it, and for that I'm happy to use this mic and try to get things a little bit better than my phone camera, but I don't want it visually impeding by sitting on me here when it's not making, to me, a dramatic difference, whereas like when I'm across the room it makes a huge difference. So it's worth it to me to have it on there, but sitting here it's not worth it to me to have it sitting attached to my neck. And since I've started using this mic, I'm also now recording 2 different audio tracks because I've watched enough YouTube to see enough people be like, I just realized my mic wasn't recording that whole time, or just like weird things happen. The more pieces you introduce, like adding a mic is adding another variable rather than just recording from my phone. The more variables you introduce, the more things that can go wrong. So instead of, there's an option for this mic that I could plug this directly into my phone and just be recording my phone video with that audio rather than the phone mic, I've decided to record it separately. I plug the mic into my laptop and I use QuickTime to make an audio recording at the same time as I'm recording from my phone, just so that I have that backup. So if anything happens, goes weird with the mic, I don't just have 2 hours of footage that's completely unusable. Like I can just revert back to the phone audio that's not quite as good, but at least it exists. So that makes me feel better to have a bit of a backup going on.
All right, welcome to the behind the scenes of Ellie Makes Everything. This is my very glamorous setup. So you can see my piano is my desk basically while I'm recording. This is the top of my piano. That's what she music leans on that I have to take off when I'm using it as my filming desk because it slots into these little holes, so it sits too far forward and would like block everything. So wow, what's in frame here? Let's see. Okay, so like I mentioned, my laptop is off to the side here. You can see my monitor. Usually I'm plugged in my camera, my phone to my computer, just so that there's not a lag on the video. But right now I can't walk around and be plugged in, so it is what it is. But so you can see the monitor there. We have a fun infinity video going on. And then my recording notes are here while I'm recording. And here is my GorillaPod that the isopropyl alcohol is really selling this. So my GorillaPod that my phone sits on, and then this is the little clamp that screws into it. So my phone is usually in there. Obviously right now it's in my hand. Here is my Rode Wireless Micro sitting on top of this bottle of isopropyl alcohol because since I don't put it on my lapel like you're actually supposed to, I thought I would experiment today. Last time I just set it on top of this book, but I wondered if I put it up here a bit closer to the phone, if it would improve my quality a little more. My tripod, as you can see, is sitting on the Complete Encyclopedia of Stitchery, which feels appropriate because it just wasn't quite as tall as I needed it to be. So I gave it a little boost, and I thought that would be the appropriate book to do that with. Here is my trusty tea and my trusty Yeti. I did paint my nails last minute for this video, so my nail polish stuff is there. And this is a pile of books that I intend to discuss in my next video. So I kind of will sometimes accumulate things there that I plan to talk about soon. I will usually just have like a project bag like sitting on the floor or whatever I'm going to talk about. And sometimes I'll put other project related stuff up on top of the piano. This bench opens, so this is where all of my recording stuff goes when I'm not recording. So like the tripod goes in there, the mic goes in there. That is my LG Litra Beam, so it collapses. It also fits in there. This is my random extra lamp that just helps fill in a little bit of light on the other side of me, the other side from the window. Windows over there. And oh, you can also see plugged into my laptop, this is the little transmitter for the microphone where I am recording to QuickTime on my computer. And yeah, this is my extremely glamorous filming setup. Hope you liked your tour. Okay, I feel like I didn't hit this point hard enough in recording this video the first time. You do not need to buy anything to start your YouTube channel. Like, if you have a camera phone that was made sometime in the last like 10 years, like, I truly think that you're good. I hear a lot of people talk about like, oh, I'm like saving up so I can buy equipment to start my channel. Do not do that. Like, I literally can't think of like a worse use of like 500 to 1,000 to how much, I don't know how much money you're planning on spending, but like if you're actually trying to buy like a camera to record on, like that is not cheap. It is not worth it. Like, I promise you. Like, yes, big channels will upgrade their equipment eventually, but like it is so not what gets you an audience. Like, I think that there's a certain kind of bare minimum level of quality that people need in order to want to watch most of the time. But again, like the average camera phone from the last decade meets that criteria. Like, we're not in the era anymore of things by default looking like they were filmed on a potato. So like, if you want a YouTube channel and you're like, I can't afford to yet, like, stop, release that criteria, because it's fake and it's stopping you from doing something that you 100% could be doing right now. If you are compelling, if you are making interesting videos, it does not matter if your audio is like this good or this good. Like, that, it's so minute. Like, as long as it's not terrible, and like, again, I'm hoping that some tips I'm giving in this video will help show you how you can make it not terrible using very basic things. Like, that's all you need. You will be able to meet that kind of minimum quality threshold just fine with what you have in all likelihood.
So when I'm editing in Adobe Premiere Pro, but I don't need to be. Like, I'm using it because I already pay for the Adobe Creative Suite for my work as a graphic designer. So I prefer to use Adobe Premiere because I just find it a bit easier to be precise with it rather than using iMovie. But like, I don't think I would pay for Premiere if I didn't already have it. Like, if I was just doing it for YouTube, iMovie is fine. I'm not doing anything advanced. Like, I am at most popping up images and text. So it's very basic. But so the way that I will usually do my editing is when I'm doing that initial main cut, I'm not going in and putting in all the images as I go, because I find that slows down the cut too much. Like, it's easier for me to focus on one type of editing and then move on to that other type of editing later. But while I'm doing that initial cut, I do pop in the little sound effect, that little like pop that happens when I show an image. I do stick that in so that when I'm going back to put in images, I know where they are. I don't have to like watch through the whole video to find those spots. So that just makes it a bit easier. So at the stage where I'm popping in images, this is another thing that I've sort of templatized a bit over time. So I now have like a fairly organized library of my Ravelry screenshots. So I can find like, okay, I know I've talked about this pattern before. Here's that image, I can pop it in. And it's just when I start working on a different pattern or talk about something I haven't talked about before that I have to go create a new screenshot for that one. But one thing that's also made this faster for me is that I take the screenshots using a tool that captures the entire screen plus it scrolls. I think it's called Awesome Screenshot. It's like a web browser add-on that I use. And then so because that always generates a screenshot with the exact same width, and like Ravelry pages are all the same format, I have set up a Photoshop action that will then crop all the screenshots to look exactly the same to the same format, which means that when I pop it into Adobe Premiere, as long as I've like copied and pasted from a previous instance of showing a pattern, the new screenshot will fit exactly the same way. So I don't have to like drag any corners to adjust anything. It's just like, it just fits perfectly on its own as soon as I drop it in. So that just helps to save a little bit. And similarly, when I'm just starting my initial cut, I'm not starting from an empty Premiere file. I've created a template file based on past episodes. So it already has a lot of media imported that I'm using consistently. It already has my little like pop sound paired with an image ready to go. So I just have to swap out what the image is. Just like these little things that help save time. When I'm creating my thumbnails, I'm creating them in Adobe Illustrator. But again, this is because I'm a graphic designer and I have the software and I'm very comfortable with it. But like, if you don't, you could easily use Canva. I just, as a graphic designer, hate Canva because it's designed for non-designers. So they don't let you tweak a lot of the like little finicky things that I like to tweak just as like little touches. So it drives me out of my mind that I can't do those things. So I hate working in Canva, but if you're not a designer, Canva's great because Adobe Illustrator is terrible when you're not a designer. There's just too many settings and it's too overwhelming. So for me, it's perfect. If you're not a graphic designer, Canva is better for you, I promise. Don't feel like you should be using Adobe software, you should not. All right, now let's do some Q&A because I asked in a recent video that there was anything in particular that you were curious to know about the behind the scenes, and I got a few really good questions. So the first one is, when did I start getting real engagement on my videos and what kind of promotion did I do to help it get there? So this is one where I also would suggest making sure you watch the part 1 in this series, going over all the numbers on my channel, because you will kind of see how the growth shapes out over time there. But I will say I was very surprised by like the trajectory of this. So my first video I posted was basically what I expected. I think it got like maybe a couple hundred views. A surprising percentage of those views became subscribers, so I was happy about that, but I was like, yep, okay, we're building a new YouTube channel from the ground floor. Not many people are here, sounds about right. My second video I posted was my everything I ever knit, so I was kind of hoping that that would be one that would kind of get its tentacles in the algorithm a little bit more, knowing that that's just a popular type of video, and I hoped that that would kind of help get the word out about my channel to the algorithm gods and that they might inform some of the rest of you. And that did work out for me pretty well. Like, I don't know for sure that that would happen 100% of the time. I don't know if it's entirely repeatable that way, but I do think that it dramatically increased the odds of that video getting viewership. So I think that trying to do video formats that tend to be popular in the space are a helpful way to kind of get you off the ground a little bit, which that one definitely did. Like, that video got me to 1,000 subscribers. So it happened quite quickly for me, and then growth definitely slowed down quite a lot for a few months after that. So we had sort of an initial like, whoop, the algorithm knows you exist and it thinks people will like you. And now you're on your own for a bit. So again, if you want more details on that, definitely check out the numbers video. But I would say that it did feel really quickly like I was getting engagement. Like, by the second video, I was like, oh, there are people watching, there are people commenting, and I can comment back and we can have conversations about this. So it was definitely rewarding, like, really quickly in that way. But I also know, like, that's not how it goes for a lot of people. And I think that, like, some people will take longer to ramp up to the algorithm really spreading their stuff out, but then might stay on a much sharper growth incline. Whereas mine, like I said, I had a really big spike at first and then it really crashed and had to build back up from there. So I hope that if you're in the early stages of a channel and you don't get that initial algorithm boost, try not to get too discouraged, because the algorithm is so random and it'll come for you eventually. And I think that there are things that you can do to help kind of try to summon it, if you will. But it's kind of a crapshoot, and you just kind of have to play the game long enough that eventually you will get a win, you know? But I do think that the algorithm has a tendency to try to help out new channels early on. I think there tends to be a bit of an extra push on early videos just to be like, this is a new thing, does anybody like it? Because I've seen a similar thing happen with several new knitting podcast channels where some of their early videos will do really well, like better than they're expecting. And then similar to me, it's like, oh, okay, views are down now. Okay, we have to kind of try to crawl our way back up to where we had been after what seemed like a bizarrely promising start. And it's like, okay, that was a little bit overpromised. Now we have to kind of work our way back. But at least when it takes that shape, you have that bump of initial encouragement. You have some people watching who are talking to you and making it feel like you're not speaking to the void, right? I think that if you feel like you're talking to the void for too long, that can become discouraging really quickly. So that's definitely an area where I feel like I got kind of lucky in just getting a little bit of traction pretty quickly. As far as promotion that I did for it, honestly, like, I didn't. Like, I posted it on my Instagram account, but really all that resulted in was like friends and family being like, you're starting a what? Just like teasing me about it. Like, and that definitely, I don't have like a large Instagram following, so it's not like that was really accomplishing a whole lot. It really is the algorithm. Like, we are all just at the mercy of YouTube's algorithm and when it decides to bless us or not. Yeah, I didn't do any kind of like shorts or like reels to promote it. I hate making short form video. It's not my thing, and I did not bother. Would that maybe have helped? Maybe, I don't know. But I feel really good about how my channel did in its first year. Again, see my first year stats video. So I don't wish that I had done that. I feel like an important thing for me in my YouTube channel has been doing what I want to do and as little as possible of the parts of it that I don't want to do, and just trying to do as much as I can for my channel within the parameters of what I enjoy and not forcing myself to do things that I don't just in the name of growth. Because I think especially like if you are kind of having a harder time getting your hooks in the algorithm, the more stuff you're doing that you don't enjoy as you're not yet seeing results, like the harder that's going to be to convince yourself to keep doing it. Like, I think that until you really have a proof of concept where you're getting a kind of engagement that makes it feel more sustainable and worthwhile on its own, until that point, you're running only off of your own enthusiasm, right? And your own internal motivation to do that. So I think if you stack too many parts of the process you don't like onto that, it's really hard to run off of enthusiasm when you're not enthused about half the stuff you have to do. So I would say that if you're not getting a lot of traction yet, but you don't like doing that kind of promotional stuff, I wouldn't bother. I would just focus that energy on making the actual content, because the algorithm will find and spread good content eventually. And like, the better and more compelling your content is when the algorithm is showing it to people, the more those people are going to engage with it, the longer they're going to watch, and then that feeds back into the algorithm of like, oh, those first 100 people we showed it to, a lot of them really liked it. Let's show it to a couple hundred more and it spreads exponentially, right? So I would say focus your energy on making your videos the best that they can be. And if the other stuff isn't really your thing, don't worry too much about it. Another question was, does the effort and energy put into the channel feel worth it? And this was caveated with whatever worth it means to you, because obviously like everybody's doing this for kind of different reasons. And this one's tricky. Like I guess inherently, yes, I must think that it's worth it because no one's forcing me to do this. Again, based on my numbers video, I made some money from this, but nowhere near the amount that I would make if I were even just taking a standard minimum wage job. So like if I were just trying to make money, this would be the worst possible way to do it, right? This would be silly. So as much as I feel like if I were making no money from the channel right now, I think I would kind of be struggling to continue spending the amount of time that I'm spending on it. Like I think that I've needed some of that to motivate me because this is something I enjoy doing, but just the sheer amount of time that it takes, I don't know that I would enjoy that much of it that regularly with zero other sort of input motivation, if that makes sense. I also, I think, get a lot of kind of fun out of just like kind of seeing the channel progress. Like I think that I get more out of it seeing things go up over time. Whereas like even if you took all the same numbers, like if say I made the exact same amount of money at the end of the year, but if it was averaged perfectly evenly out throughout the year and the graph was just a flat line, I think that would be less motivating for me than starting lower and ending higher and like seeing that trajectory. Like there's a bit of like a feeling of a game to it of like, ooh, is this video gonna do better or worse than the last one? And like, what do I learn from that? And it's just kind of like inherently interesting to me. I like numbers. If you've watched my channel before, you probably figured that out because I'm always talking about cost per wear and what do these projects cost and how worth it does that seem and all of these things. So I just like numbers. So there's kind of a fun to it for me in that way. But so yeah, I mean, I guess automatically, yes, it does feel worth it to me and that's why I'm still doing it. But at the same time, if after a whole year of doing it consistently, if after putting 270 hours, like 27 videos times 10 hours over the course of a year, and I wasn't getting any sort of traction, like views wise or revenue wise, would I still be doing it? Honestly, probably no. Like, I don't think that I could put in that much effort feeling like I was speaking to the void for that long. Another question that I got mentions, at the start of every video, I say, I'm an independent graphic designer. And so they ask, it sounds like that's probably not like a standard 9-to-5 job. How do you think that your job impacts your YouTube, like your ability to do that? Do you think that you would still be doing this channel if you were working 9 to 5, going into an office 5 days a week? How do you think that would affect your channel and the time that you set aside for it? And this is a really, really good question because honestly, it would have a huge impact. So like, first of all, I work a 30-hour week as a designer. I don't work a standard 40-hour week. I'm lucky that I don't need to work 40 hours a week to make enough to support myself, so I choose not to. So like that right there, that's 10 hours. Like I said that it takes about 10 hours to make a video every other week. That's 10 hours a week right there. So like that alone, I could be doing a YouTube video every week with just the time that I save from that. So like, I will absolutely not sit here and pretend that my job is not enabling me to do this because it 100% is. I also don't have to commute anywhere. I walk down the hallway into another room in my house that is my office. So that's saving me probably like at least another 5 hours a week. That 5 hours right there, 5 hours a week, that's 10 hours bi-weekly. That is enough time to keep my channel going compared to what someone who commutes would have. This wasn't specifically mentioned in the question, but another huge factor here is I don't have kids. Like the mind boggles for me of like people who have YouTube channels while working, while having kids. Because like, I just can't fathom how that impacts your time. How do you have any of it? Really, I don't. I don't understand. So all of these things, like I work a shorter week than average, I do not commute, I do not have kids, like compared to most people, I have all the time in the world. And like, yet still, like I feel like I don't want to make more than one video every 2 weeks. That's too much. I won't have enough time for things. Like part of it is that I know that I just have many different hobbies that are all important to me. Like if I were a person who like knitting is my hobby, singular, like that is what I love to do in my spare time, however much of it I have. If I were that person working a 9 to 5 where I had to go into the office, I think I probably would fit this in and manage to do that. But the reality is that that's not the case. There are other things that are still important to me. I love to read, I write, I play in a rec volleyball league, I like to scrapbook, I like to spend time with my dog. Like there's just too many other things. So like honestly, If I were commuting to a 9 to 5, I don't know that this channel would exist. Like something would have to give. Like I wouldn't be able to do all of the things that I now do. And I don't know, like the channel was the most recent thing to join. So maybe it would be the first thing to go. I don't know, honestly. And I think that like genuinely, cynically, it might depend on how much money the channel were taking on at that point. Like say 2 years from now, for whatever reason, I can't keep working for myself and need a 9 to 5. If the channel's doing really well and making good money for the time I spend on it, that would be more incentivizing to figure out how to keep it in and what else to cut than if it's not really bringing in anything or not enough to feel worth what I would have to cut. Like, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if the channel would exist if I had that kind of job. And I think that that's a really big consideration for people in starting it. Like, how much time do you have available and how do you want to prioritize the things that you might possibly spend it on, right? It's tough. It really just depends how important the project of the YouTube channel is to you. My job also helps a little bit. And then, like I said before, like I already have software. I'm already very familiar with making graphics, like making thumbnails is not at all hard for me. It also, I do have flexibility where like if I like couldn't for any reason film when I normally film, I could in theory like film in the middle of a work day and then make up that work later. But I really try not to do this because I find that being self-employed, working from home, like keeping a schedule is kind of the only thing that like keeps me together and working in the absence of other kinds of workplace structure, right? Not having the commute, not having a boss supervising me. Like I need something to keep me on the rails. So a schedule is really what that is. So I really try not to mess with it too often. And the last question was any general tips for people interested in starting their own podcast? Are there any things that you wouldn't see from your end of things that I think are important for you to know before you do that? I would say, maybe it sounds like obvious, but like, you'd better really like it. Like you'd better enjoy the process because it is too much work to be doing it only for the end result. I mean, I touched on this a bit earlier, but just editing alone takes so much time. And I guess it takes different amount of time for different people. Some people will just like hit record, sit down and hit stop 45 minutes later and that's their episode. But I do think that it's harder to get traction in videos that are recorded that way. I do. I think that there are successful knitting podcasts that operate that way, but I think that for the most part, just in terms of like getting engagement, especially when your channel is new and you don't have much of an audience yet, I think that videos that are a little bit more edited tend to be much easier for new people to get into when they don't yet have a personal investment in you. Like if I think of the channels I follow that have a lot less editing, they're ones that I got into kind of under specific circumstances when I like wasn't feeling well and just kind of needed something like low key on in the background while I just kind of like moped for a day. You know, I wasn't looking for, I guess I just didn't need as much out of what I was watching. And after watching a few episodes of someone like that, I'm now like, okay, I'm invested in this person. But I think it's really hard to rope in new people into a largely unedited format. I think it just tends to feel lower energy. And I think it's just hard to hook new viewers without a little bit more than that. So I honestly think the fact that my videos are like cut more than the average knitting podcast helped it out in the beginning. Like I think that there is a large component of luck with the algorithm, but in terms of what I bring to things, like where I'm putting myself to then get lucky from, I think a lot of that is the amount of editing that I do. So if you do not like editing, I would just maybe bear that in mind, that you might have a much slower growth trajectory. It might just take longer to find your people if that's not something you want to spend a lot of time on.
I also want to add, I think the exception or sort of trade-off to this are the ones who just by their nature are like extra high energy and extra compelling. Like I'm thinking right now about the Black Sheep Knitter. Like her videos are very, very low on editing and they're very long. But somehow, like Sarah just chilling, talking to a camera by herself for an hour and a half is like the best time. And that's because Sarah is just so good at this. Like she just brings such a natural charisma that completely compensates for the kind of pacing slowdown that you get from a very low edited video. Like honestly, watching her videos, I almost don't even notice that they're low editing. Like I don't notice until she's like, oh no, I need to go look this up on my iPad. And then it's like kind of vamping while she's doing that. And it's like, oh right, I'm watching this because she's not cutting it. So I think that it can be done, but I think that this is a thing where like you need to know yourself. Like, are you that kind of person? Are you that sort of like high energy, can just talk and talk and talk for 2 hours and people are always telling you how like bubbly and funny you are? Like if you're that person, I think that's who that format works the best for.
Another thing, and this might not be true for everyone, but I find I need privacy to record. I cannot record knowing that anybody else might be hearing me. So like, if you have never sat down and tried to talk to a camera, I think that if it's hard for you in your life to have an empty house, just depending on your particular life circumstances, just like do a little test run. Just see like, can you hit record on your phone and sit there and talk about your knitting for even just 5 minutes with those other people around? Because if you can't, I think you need to consider whether or how you will set things up so that you can have filming time alone. because I can't. Like, again, so much of the editing that I do is because of the way that I will sort of start and stop and kind of get stuck in speaking when I'm talking to a camera in ways that I don't in normal conversation. And that's when it's just me and a camera. Like, I could not even say one word if someone else were sitting over there. So I think that's a thing to bear in mind if you might need to figure out how to get like a partner and kids out of the house or something like that. And then I think another really big thing is just, where can you film? Because again, if we're going to talk about like, okay, what did I do that then put me in a good position for when the algorithm started caring and showing it to people? I think that number 1 is editing. Number 2 is this. People like the bookcase. Like, I genuinely would be shocked if that has not been part, at least, of what has made people click on my thumbnails and start watching in the first place. So I think that having some sort of like aesthetic background counts for more than we would like it to, more than it should. And it doesn't have to be a bookcase. And I also don't think it has to be elaborate. So like, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't have a library, like, what do you want from me? Can I not have a YouTube channel? Like, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is you need to figure out, assuming you don't have some sort of like good like professional lighting set up for recording, where in your home can you get good natural light and not behind you? You do not want to be backlit. That will make your video even worse. But you want it preferably in front of you or kind of coming in from the sides. Like, I have my really big window here, and then further away I have big windows on that side, but that's why it's always lighter on this side, because I have a really big window quite close to me here. So like I was saying before with like the iPhone recording, natural light is magic. It is what will make your video look good. Even when all the other factors are garbage, like, it's what's gonna save it. So I would say, like, even if you have a cuter spot in your house somewhere with bad light, I think you're probably better off with the less cute background with better natural light. But try and find a way to make the background a little bit cute. Just at the very least, like, you know, if you have like tiny kids running around and your home is chaos, just if you can just like create one little corner where the chaos cannot encroach, where just that corner is like tidy and simple and maybe has like a cute picture on the wall. Just having somewhere clean and minimal to record rather than having like the chaos of your life visible behind you counts for a lot, right? YouTube is a visual medium, especially knitting podcasts. People are generally not, I don't think, putting these on and then walking away and not looking at them, because we want to be looking at the knit. So just bear in mind, people are going to be looking at your background. So just anything you can do to make it look not messy and also not barren, I think is helpful.
Okay, even later editing Allie coming to you here with a sleepy copper. I just want to add one more piece of advice, which is that the first few seconds of your video are so important. Like, I've seen, especially in the knitting podcast world, a lot of new channels or even people who've been posting quite a lot and have just never managed to get any traction. When I go look at their channels, a lot of the time, the first several seconds of the video is just like them having just pressed the button on the camera and going to sit down and kind of getting themselves settled. And sometimes there can be as much as like 10-20 seconds before anything is even said. And I think that that is just like absolutely killer on a video. Like, the first few seconds of a video, especially when it's a new viewer who's clicked on it, are so important to get people's attention and to keep it. This is why you'll often see channels including sort of like a cold open on their video, where it's something sort of out of context from later in the video to kind of intrigue you, because that tends to be more gripping than like, hi, hello, I'm so-and-so from here and there, and this is what this channel is about. And I do include that on some of my videos. When I don't, usually it's because I just forgot. So I usually intend to. Sometimes I just like can't come up with the right thing to put there, so I don't. But this is why people do that. And if you don't want to do a cold open, that's fine. I don't think it's necessary, but I do think that you need to treat those first few seconds of your video really preciously. So if you're choosing to do no other editing at all, just cut the very beginning, just everything from when you push record to when you actually start talking, because those seconds are too important.
All right, so I think that's it. That's kind of everything I have figured out in my first year of having a YouTube channel. So like I said before, if you haven't seen part 1 where I'm going through all the numbers, including what I made for my YouTube channel in the first year, I definitely recommend going to check that one out. If you have any other questions, things you're curious to know about the channel, please do leave them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer those some other time as well. If you'd like to be here next time, please consider subscribing if you're not already. But if you already are, you're my favorite, and I'll see you next time.